The pharmacist lowered her voice like she was about to deliver bad news no one wanted to hear. "Miss Carter, your insurance was canceled 3 weeks ago." I stared at her, certain she had the wrong file. I hadn't canceled anything. I hadn't even logged into that account in months. But that afternoon, I stood at the marina and watched my son Daniel pop open a bottle of champagne on the deck of a brand new boat, smiling like he had just won the life I thought we were both still trying to survive. And suddenly, something inside me went very, very cold. If this story already stirs something in your heart, take a moment to like and subscribe. And tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I'd really love to know. My name is Isabella Carter, and for most of my life I believed that stability was something you built slowly, brick by brick, choice by choice, year after year. My husband Robert Carter used to say that a quiet life was the strongest kind. Not flashy, not loud, but steady, predictable, safe. We lived just outside Charleston, South Carolina, in a modest coastal home that overlooked a small marina. It wasn't luxurious, but it was ours. Robert worked for decades managing logistics for a shipping company, and I handled the books for a local dental office. We weren't rich, but we were careful. Every dollar had a purpose. Every account had a record. Every decision was discussed. Robert believed in one rule above all: never sign anything you don't fully understand and never give away control just because it's convenient. At the time, I thought that was just his cautious nature. I didn't realize it was a warning meant for the future I would one day face alone. When Robert passed away, it wasn't sudden, but it still shattered me. 42 years of marriage doesn't disappear quietly. It leaves echoes in every room. His coffee mug stayed in the same cabinet for months because I couldn't bring myself to move it. His chair at the dining table remained slightly pulled out, as if he might come back and sit down again. Grief has a way of making you softer than you should be. And that's when Daniel stepped in. My son had always been charming, easygoing, the kind of boy who could talk his way out of trouble with a smile. Growing up, he was never cruel, but he wasn't disciplined either. Robert used to say Daniel preferred comfort over responsibility, and while he said it gently, there was always a trace of concern behind his eyes. Still, Daniel was my son, my only child. When Robert died, Daniel showed up every day for the first 2 weeks. He brought groceries, he fixed a leaking faucet, he sat with me in silence when I couldn't speak. And when he said, "Mom, let me handle the bills for a while. You don't need to worry about all that right now," I didn't hesitate. I was tired. Tired of paperwork, tired of decisions, tired of pretending I understood things that Robert had always handled so effortlessly. So I said yes. At first it felt like relief. Daniel set up automatic payments, consolidated a few accounts, and told me he was streamlining everything. He spoke in confident, reassuring tones, like someone who had everything under control. I trusted him because I needed to trust someone. Looking back now, that was the moment everything began to shift. Not dramatically, not all at once, just small changes. Emails I stopped receiving, statements that no longer arrived in the mail, questions I asked that were answered just a little too quickly with just enough detail to sound convincing but not enough to invite further discussion. At the time, I told myself it was normal, that I was adjusting, that I didn't need to be involved in everything anymore. And then there was Chloe. Daniel met her about a year before Robert passed, but I didn't truly see her until after the funeral. She was beautiful in a polished, deliberate way, always put together, always camera-ready. Even at family dinners, she dressed like she might be photographed at any moment. Chloe lived her life online. Every outing was a post, every meal was curated, every moment was filtered. At first, I thought it was just a younger generation thing, but over time I began to notice something deeper. Chloe didn't just want a good life, she wanted a life that looked impressive. There's a difference. And Daniel slowly, quietly began to change beside her. He started talking about things he had never cared about before. Opportunities, branding, image. He spoke less about stability and more about growth, less about security and more about visibility. Robert would have noticed immediately. I didn't. Or maybe I didn't want to, because acknowledging it would have meant questioning the one person I still had left. There were moments, small ones, that should have stood out more. Like the time Daniel casually mentioned that managing my finances was more complicated than he expected and suggested moving some funds around to optimize things. Or the afternoon, Chloe joked, half laughing, half serious, that once everything was organized, Daniel would finally be able to focus on bigger goals. I remember asking, "What bigger goals?" And Daniel just smiled and said, "You'll see." At the time, it sounded hopeful. Now it sounds like a warning I ignored. The marina, oddly enough, became a central part of those conversations. Robert had always loved that place. Not because it made money, it barely did, but because it was steady. It gave structure to the community. Fishermen, small boat owners, weekend visitors. It was a simple ecosystem built on trust. After Robert passed, the marina remained in operation under the same management. I never interfered. I didn't feel the need to. Daniel, however, began visiting more often. At first, he said it was just to check on things. Then it became meetings, then discussions about potential upgrades. Chloe started tagging the marina in her posts, calling it a hidden gem with untapped luxury potential. I remember feeling a flicker of discomfort when I saw that phrase, untapped luxury potential. That wasn't what Robert had built. But I said nothing, because by then, silence had become my habit. It's strange how easily you can convince yourself that everything is fine just to avoid the possibility that it isn't. If I'm honest, there was one moment, one very specific moment when I should have stopped everything and asked questions. It was about 6 months before the pharmacy incident. Daniel was sitting at my kitchen table with his laptop open, explaining something about account updates. I wasn't really following. My mind was elsewhere. But I remember Robert's voice in my head clear, as if he were standing right behind me. "Don't sign anything you don't understand." I looked at Daniel and said, "Should I be reviewing these myself?" And for just a second, just a fraction of a second, his expression changed. Not enough for someone else to notice, but enough for a mother to feel. Then he smiled. "Mom, you trust me, right?" And I nodded. Because at the time, trusting him felt easier than questioning him. That was the moment I handed over more than just paperwork. I handed over control. And now, standing in that pharmacy weeks later, holding a prescription I couldn't afford without insurance, I realized something I wasn't ready to face. This didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly, quietly, while I was grieving, while I was trusting, while I was choosing peace over awareness. And somewhere in that quiet, careful life Robert and I had built, something had been taken from me, and I had let it happen. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the pharmacist's words over and over again like they were part of a conversation I could somehow fix if I just listened closely enough. Canceled 3 weeks ago. The number wouldn't leave me alone. 3 weeks. That meant this wasn't a mistake that had just happened. It had been done, settled, processed, and I had been living my life without knowing. And if I hadn't gone to pick up that prescription, how long would it have taken me to notice? The thought made my stomach turn. By morning, I had made up my mind. I needed answers, real ones. Not the soft, reassuring kind Daniel always gave me, the kind that made things sound fine without actually explaining anything. I made myself a cup of coffee, though I barely touched it, and sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand. My fingers felt stiff as I dialed the number on the back of my insurance card. The automated voice guided me through a maze of options before finally connecting me to a representative. Her name was Melissa. She sounded young, calm, professional. "Thank you for calling." "How can I help you today, Miss Carter?" I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. "I was told yesterday that my health insurance was canceled," I said. "I didn't request that. I need to understand what happened." There was a brief pause as she pulled up my account. "I see the cancellation here," she said after a moment. "It was processed 3 weeks ago through your online portal." My chest tightened. "I didn't do that," I said quietly. Another pause, this one more careful. "I understand your concern," she replied, "but the request was submitted using your login credentials. The correct username, password, and security verification were all provided." That meant whoever did it didn't hack their way in. They walked right through the front door. "Can you tell me what device it was done from?" I asked. "I'm sorry, I don't have access to that level of detail," she said. "But I can confirm it was an authorized action based on the information provided. Authorized. The word felt like a slap. "I want the insurance reinstated," I said, my voice firmer now. "We can begin a reinstatement process," Melissa said gently, "but there may be a waiting period and some coverage gaps could apply." Coverage gaps. Time without protection. Time I didn't even know I had lost. I closed my eyes for a moment. "Was there any note, any reason given for the cancellation?" I asked. She hesitated. There is a note indicating the policyholder requested to redirect funds toward other financial priorities. Other financial priorities. I felt something inside me go still. Can you clarify what that means? I asked. I'm sorry, that's all the note says, she replied. Of course it was. Just vague enough to sound reasonable. Just specific enough to be intentional. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat there for a long time with the phone still in my hand. Other financial priorities. The words echoed in my mind, and then without warning another image pushed its way forward. Daniel, standing on that boat, champagne in his hand, smiling. My chest tightened again, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was something sharper, something colder. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. So I did what I had always done when something felt wrong. I gave him the chance to explain. Daniel came by that afternoon just like he often did. He walked in without knocking, calling out, "Hey, Mom," like everything in the world was exactly as it should be. I studied him carefully as he stepped into the kitchen. Relaxed posture, easy smile. No sign of stress, no sign of guilt. At least not on the surface. "Daniel," I said, keeping my tone calm, "I need to ask you something." He pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. "What's up?" I took a breath. "I went to pick up my medication yesterday and they told me my insurance was canceled." For the briefest moment, so quick, I might have missed it if I hadn't been looking. His expression flickered. Then it was gone. "That doesn't sound right," he said, frowning. "Are you sure they didn't make a mistake? I called the insurance company this morning," I replied. "They said it was canceled through my account. 3 weeks ago." He leaned back slightly, crossing his arms. "Okay. That's weird," he said. "But you've been stressed, Mom. Maybe you clicked something without realizing it. Those online portals can be confusing." There it was, that gentle redirection, that soft suggestion that the problem might be me. "I didn't cancel my insurance," I said more firmly this time. He held my gaze for a moment, then sighed. "I'm just saying sometimes things happen," he replied. "We don't always remember every little detail. Every little detail." I felt a flicker of anger, but I pushed it down. "I also asked if there was a reason listed," I continued. "They said the funds were redirected to other financial priorities." Something changed again. This time it wasn't his face, it was his stillness. "Just for a second." Then he shrugged. "That could mean anything," he said quickly. "Maybe they just categorized it that way in their system." Before I could respond, the front door opened again. Chloe walked in. She looked exactly the way she always did, perfectly styled, perfectly composed, her phone already in her hand like it was an extension of her body. "Hey," she said lightly, barely glancing at me before focusing on Daniel. "Did you see the comments on the Marina post? People are loving it." Then she noticed the tension in the room. "What's going on?" she asked. "Mom thinks her insurance got canceled somehow," Daniel said casually. Chloe's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh," she said. "That's not good." "I didn't cancel it," I said, looking directly at her. She gave me a sympathetic smile. "Of course you wouldn't do that on purpose," she said. "But these things happen, especially with online accounts. My mom clicks the wrong things all the time." I stared at her. There it was again. Not an accusation. Not outright denial. Just enough doubt to make me question myself. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Look, Mom," he said, softening his tone. "Why don't I take care of it? I'll call them, sort everything out, and get it fixed. You don't need to stress about this." It sounded helpful, supportive, reasonable, but something about it didn't sit right anymore. Because if he had access to fix it, he had access to change it. "I already called," I said quietly. That made him pause. "Just for a second. I started the reinstatement process," I added. Chloe crossed her arms lightly. "Well, that's good," she said. Problem solved. Problem solved. As if 3 weeks without insurance meant nothing. As if the risk didn't matter. As if I didn't matter. I looked at both of them, sitting there so calm, so composed, and for the first time a thought surfaced that I couldn't push away anymore. They weren't surprised. Not really. And that meant one thing. This wasn't something that happened to me. It was something that had been done around me, and possibly by someone sitting right in front of me. I didn't say that out loud. Not yet. Instead, I nodded slowly, as if I accepted their explanations, as if everything made sense, as if I still trusted them. Because in that moment, I realized something important. If I confronted them too soon, they would deny everything. They already were. But if I stayed quiet, if I watched, If I paid attention the way Robert had always taught me to, then maybe, just maybe, I would finally see the truth clearly. And this time, I wouldn't look away. That evening, after Daniel and Chloe left, I didn't turn on the television like I usually did. I didn't call a friend. I didn't distract myself. I sat at the kitchen table in complete silence, hands folded around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold, and for the first time in a very long time I paid attention, not to what they said, but to what didn't add up, because once you stop accepting easy answers, the gaps start to show. Daniel had told me not to worry. Chloe had smiled like this was all just a small misunderstanding, but nothing about it felt small. 3 weeks without insurance wasn't small. Redirected funds weren't small. And that flicker in Daniel's face when I mentioned the cancellation, that wasn't small either. So instead of confronting them again, I did something different. I stayed quiet, and I started looking. The next morning I pulled out the old wooden box Robert used to keep our financial records. It was tucked away in the hallway closet, exactly where he had always left it. Inside were folders neatly labeled, carefully organized just like everything else he had ever touched. Insurance, bank statements, marina documents, even old tax returns. Robert never threw anything away without a reason. At the time, I used to tease him about it. Now I silently thanked him. I carried the box to the kitchen table and opened the insurance folder first. The last printed statement I had was dated nearly 4 months ago. After that, nothing. No updates, no renewal notices, no premium summaries, which at the time I hadn't questioned. Because Daniel had told me everything was set up on automatic. Paperless is easier, Mom, he had said. Less clutter. I believed him. Now I wasn't so sure. I turned to the banking folder next. There were fewer recent statements there too. Not missing entirely, but thinner, less detailed. And that's when something clicked. Daniel hadn't just helped me manage my accounts. He had changed how I received information, quietly, gradually, so I would notice less. I reached for my phone and logged into my bank account. It took me 2 tries to remember the password. That alone made my chest tighten. I used to know these things without thinking. Once I got in, I pulled up the transaction history. At first glance, everything looked normal. Groceries, utilities, routine payments. But when I scrolled further back and looked closer, I began to see patterns. Small adjustments, shifts, amounts that didn't quite match what I remembered. Then I saw it. A recurring withdrawal. Same day each month. Same amount. And the number made my breath catch. It was almost identical to my old insurance premium, but it wasn't labeled as insurance. It was labeled as a financing payment. My fingers hovered over the screen. Financing. For what I clicked into the details. There wasn't much information, just a company name I didn't recognize and a reference number. But I didn't need a full explanation, because suddenly an image flashed in my mind. Bright sunlight, water, champagne spraying into the air, Daniel standing on that boat. I felt a cold wave move through my chest. No, I told myself. No, that's too much. That's too far. But the numbers didn't lie. I went back through the past few months. The withdrawals had started shortly after Daniel began helping with my accounts. At first they were smaller, then they increased, gradually, carefully, like someone testing how much they could take without being noticed. I leaned back in my chair staring at the screen. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't confusion. It was a decision, a series of decisions, made over time, and I had trusted him through all of it. My hands trembled slightly, but I forced myself to keep going. If I stopped now, I would fall back into doubt, and I couldn't afford that anymore. I opened my email next, or at least I tried to. When I entered my usual login information, it didn't work. I frowned and tried again. Still nothing. A slow, sinking feeling settled in my stomach. I clicked Forgot Password. The recovery email that popped up on the screen wasn't mine. It was one I didn't recognize. My heart started to pound. Daniel. It had to be Daniel. He was the only one who had access, the only one who had helped set everything up, which meant he hadn't just been managing my accounts, he had been controlling what I could see. For how long, weeks, months, the thought made me feel suddenly very, very small. Like the ground beneath me wasn't solid anymore. Like everything I thought I understood had been quietly rearranged without my knowledge. I stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen. No, I whispered to myself. No, think. Robert wouldn't panic. He would observe. He would gather facts. He would stay steady. So I stopped pacing, took a breath, and sat back down. If Daniel had changed my email access, then he didn't want me seeing something, which meant there was more. There was always more. That's when I remembered something else. Something I had almost overlooked. Chloe's post. I opened my social media app and found her page. It didn't take long. There it was. A photo from 2 nights ago. Chloe standing on the dock holding a glass of champagne, the sunset glowing behind her. Her caption read, "New beginnings, big things coming. Stay tuned." But it wasn't the caption that caught my attention. It was what was behind her. The boat. Clear as day. Its name painted in bold letters along the side. Second wind. I stared at the image, zooming in slightly. Daniel stood just behind her, one arm resting casually along the railing, smiling like a man who had everything under control. Everything about the image screamed success, confidence, celebration. But all I could see now was the cost. I pulled up the transaction amount again. Then I looked back at the boat, then back at the number. It matched too closely, too perfectly. And in that moment, the truth settled into place with a clarity that left no room for denial. My insurance hadn't just been canceled, it had been replaced. Replaced with something Daniel wanted more, something he thought mattered more, something he believed I wouldn't notice. I set the phone down slowly. My chest felt tight, but not from confusion anymore. From something else. Something sharper. Anger. Not loud. Not explosive. But quiet. Controlled. The kind of anger that doesn't rush, it waits. And then I remembered one final thing. Something small. Something I hadn't understood at the time. A few months ago, Daniel had mentioned updating my contact preferences. At the time, I barely listened. But now, I opened my account settings, and there it was. A different email address listed as the primary contact. Not mine. His. Which meant every notification, every alert, every confirmation had gone straight to him. Not me. He hadn't just made changes, he had made sure I wouldn't see them. I sat there for a long time staring at the screen, letting the reality settle in, letting the pieces connect, letting the illusion fall apart, because once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. And now, for the first time since this all began, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't doubting myself. I wasn't wondering if I had made a mistake. I knew exactly what had happened. And more importantly, I knew this hadn't just started 3 weeks ago. It had been building, quietly, carefully, right in front of me, and I had missed it. But not anymore. This time, I was paying attention. I didn't confront Daniel the next day, or the day after that. Instead, I did something that felt almost unnatural after weeks of confusion. I reached out for help, not from family, not from anyone who might soften the truth or protect Daniel out of loyalty. I called Linda Hayes. Linda had been part of our lives for over 20 years. She and Robert used to work together on some of the marina's paperwork, and after she retired from bookkeeping, she became one of the few people Robert still trusted to double-check anything important. If Robert had ever needed a second pair of eyes, he called Linda. So I did the same. When she answered, her voice was exactly the way I remembered, steady, warm, and sharp underneath it all. "Isabella." "It's been a while," she said. "It has," I replied. "Linda, I need your help." There was a pause, not long, but enough for her to hear something in my voice. "Come by," she said simply. "Bring whatever you've got." An hour later, I was sitting at her dining table, the wooden box of documents open between us, my phone beside it, my hands folded tighter than I realized. Linda didn't rush me. She never had. She let me talk. And for the first time, I said it out loud. "My insurance was canceled," I began, "and I think Daniel did it." The words felt heavy in my mouth. Wrong. Like I was accusing someone I still wanted to protect. Linda didn't react the way I expected. She didn't gasp. She didn't question me. She just nodded once and said, "Show me." So I did. I showed her the bank transactions, the recurring payments, the missing statements, the email account I couldn't access anymore, the social media post with the boat, everything. Linda leaned forward, her glasses low on her nose, studying each detail with quiet focus. She didn't interrupt, She didn't soften anything. And when she finally leaned back in her chair, her expression wasn't shocked. It was certain. "This wasn't a mistake," she said. I swallowed. "I know. He's been moving your money," she continued. "Not all at once. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to fund something significant." My chest tightened. "The boat," I said. Linda gave a small nod. "That would be my guess." The room felt very still, very quiet. And then she said the one thing I had been trying not to hear. "You've been financially manipulated, Isabella." The word hung in the air. Manipulated. Not helped. Not supported. Not misunderstood. Manipulated. I looked down at my hands. "I trusted him," I whispered. "I know you did," Linda said gently. "That's how this works." There was no judgment in her voice, only truth, and somehow that made it harder to hear. I took a shaky breath. "What do I do now?" Linda didn't answer immediately. She reached for one of the folder's Marina documents and flipped it open. "First," she said, "you stop thinking of this as a family misunderstanding." I looked up at her. "Because it's not," she added. "This is control. Quiet, deliberate control." Her finger tapped lightly against one of the papers. "And second, you remember what you actually own." I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Linda turned the document toward me. It was something I hadn't looked at in years. A transfer record, signed after Robert passed. At the time, she said Robert restructured part of the Marina holdings. I remember that I said slowly, "But I thought it all stayed under the same management." "Most of it did," Linda replied, "but not all." She pointed to a specific section. "This portion, the primary fueling dock and the premium slip, was transferred directly into your name." I blinked. "That doesn't sound right." "It is," she said calmly. "Robert did it for liability, protection, and control." Control. The word echoed in my mind. I leaned closer, reading the document more carefully this time. And there it was. Clear, legal, undeniable. My name, attached to the most valuable physical point in the entire Marina. I sat back slowly. "I didn't even remember this," I said. Linda's expression softened slightly. "That's because Robert handled the details," she said. "But he didn't forget." A strange feeling rose in my chest. Not just surprise, something deeper, something steadier, as if even now, Robert had left something behind to protect me. "But what does this mean?" I asked. Linda folded her hands. "It means," she said, "that whatever Daniel is planning, it depends on something he doesn't fully control." I thought about the boat, about Chloe's posts, about the way they talked about big things coming, and suddenly a new piece of the puzzle slid into place. "They need the dock," I said quietly. Linda nodded. "They probably do." "Why?" "Because location is everything," she explained. "If they're trying to build some kind of charter or luxury image, they'll want the most visible, most accessible spot. The premium slip. My slip." I felt my heartbeat quicken, not with panic this time, but with something else. Awareness. Understanding. "They don't know it's mine," I said. Linda gave a small, knowing smile. "I don't think they do." For the first time since all of this began, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was seeing, and what I saw changed everything. "They took my insurance," I said slowly. Linda nodded. "And they replaced it with something they wanted," I added. "Yes." I looked down at the document again. At my name. At the dock. At the one thing they were building their future around, without realizing who truly held it. "They think I'm weak," I said. Linda didn't answer. She didn't need to, because we both knew. For weeks, months, maybe I had been quiet, grieving, trusting, letting things happen around me. But now, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just about money, or insurance, or even the boat. It was about control. And for the first time since Robert passed, I wasn't the one who had lost it. I sat up a little straighter. "What's my next step?" I asked. Linda studied me carefully. "Are you ready for the truth?" she said. "I think I already know it." She shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "I mean, are you ready to act on it?" The question settled between us. Heavy. Real. Because knowing the truth was one thing. Doing something about it, that was something else entirely. I thought about Daniel. About the little boy he used to be. About the man sitting across from me just days ago calmly telling me I might have forgotten canceling my own insurance. About Chloe. About the boat. About the dock. About Robert. And then I said something I never thought I would say. Yes. Linda nodded once. Then you need a lawyer, she said. I let out a slow breath. Because deep down, I knew she was right. And I knew something else too. This wasn't going to be a quiet conversation. It wasn't going to be fixed with apologies or explanations. Whatever came next was going to change everything. I didn't tell Daniel where I was going the next morning. For the first time in months, I left the house without explaining myself to anyone. No text, no call, no casual mention of errands. Just my purse, my documents, and a quiet sense that something inside me had finally shifted. The law office was in downtown Charleston in a brick building that had been there longer than most of the shops around it. Robert used to say places like that didn't need to advertise they survived on trust and time. The name on the door read Ethan Brooks, Attorney at Law. I hadn't seen Ethan in over a year, not since he handled the final pieces of Robert's estate. Walking inside felt strange. Familiar but distant, like stepping into a part of my life I had quietly set aside because it hurt too much to revisit. The receptionist greeted me politely, and within minutes Ethan appeared in the doorway of his office. "Isabella," he said, his expression softening. "It's good to see you. Though I wish it were under easier circumstances." So did I. But I nodded and followed him inside. His office looked exactly the same. Shelves lined with legal binders, a heavy wooden desk, framed certificates on the wall. Order, structure, clarity, everything my life had quietly lost. We sat across from each other, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then he leaned forward slightly. "What's going on?" he asked. I didn't ease into it. I didn't soften it. "I think my son has been using my accounts to move money without my consent," I said. Ethan didn't react with shock. He didn't interrupt. He simply nodded once and said, "Start from the beginning." So I did. I told him about the insurance cancellation, the bank transactions, the email changes, the boat, the conversation with Daniel. The way both he and Chloe had subtly suggested I might be confused. I laid everything out piece by piece, just like Linda had helped me organize it. When I finished, Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together. "This is serious," he said. "I know. Do you have full documentation of the transactions?" he asked. "Some," I replied. "Linda helped me gather what I could." "That's a good start," he said. "We can work with that." He paused for a moment, then added, "But before we talk about next steps, there's something else you need to understand." I felt my stomach tighten slightly. "What is it?" Ethan reached for a folder on his desk and opened it. "I reviewed your estate file this morning when you called," he said, "and there's a detail I want to make sure you fully understand." He turned the folder toward me. I recognized the document immediately. The marina transfer. The same one Linda had shown me. "Yes," I said. "Linda explained that part of the marina is in my name." Ethan nodded. "That's correct. But it's more specific than that." He pointed to a section of the document. "This portion here, this isn't just any part of the marina. It's the primary fueling dock and the premium slip." "I know," I said. "Do you understand what that means legally?" he asked. I hesitated. "It means I own it." "Yes," he said. "But more importantly, it means no one can use that space without your explicit permission." Something about the way he said it made the weight of it settle deeper. "This isn't a shared asset," he continued. "It's not controlled by the marina management company. It's not something your son can claim or negotiate on his own." I felt my breath slow slightly. "So if Daniel wanted to use that dock, he would need your authorization," Ethan finished. Silence filled the room for a moment. And then I asked the question that had been forming in my mind since yesterday. "Has he tried?" Ethan's expression shifted. Slightly. Carefully. "Yes," he said. My heart skipped. When a few weeks ago he replied, he contacted the marina office informally, at first asking about long-term docking arrangements for a new vessel. The words felt like confirmation of everything I already suspected. And I asked. "He was told that specific slip wasn't available without owner approval," Ethan said. "And he didn't know I was the owner." "No," Ethan said. "He didn't." I sat back slowly. A strange mix of emotions moved through me. Shock, relief, and something else. Something steadier. He's building something, I said quietly. Some kind of business. Chloe's been posting about it. Ethan nodded. That would make sense. That location is the most visible part of the marina. High traffic. High exposure. He needs it, I said. Yes, Ethan replied. He does. I stared at the document again, at my name, at the one thing Daniel had been moving toward without realizing where it actually led. And then I asked something I hadn't dared to say out loud before. What happens if I say no? Ethan didn't hesitate. Then he doesn't get access, he said. And whatever plan he's building becomes significantly more difficult, if not impossible. The simplicity of that answer hit harder than I expected. All this time, all this confusion, all this quiet manipulation, and the balance of power had been sitting right here, in a document I hadn't even remembered. I let out a slow breath. He took my insurance, I said. Ethan's expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened slightly. That's what it looks like, he said. He put my health at risk, I continued. Yes, and he did it while pretending to help me. Ethan didn't respond immediately. Because there was nothing to soften, nothing to reinterpret, nothing to excuse. What are my options? I asked. He leaned forward slightly. You have several, he said. We can pursue this as financial exploitation. We can file for recovery of funds. We can formally revoke his access to your accounts and issue legal notice. Each word felt heavier than the last. And the doc, I asked. That's entirely your decision, he said. You can grant access or deny it. I nodded slowly. Because for the first time I understood something clearly. This wasn't just about reacting to what Daniel had done. It was about choosing what happened next. I don't want to confront him yet, I said. Ethan studied me. Why not? Because he thinks I don't know, I replied. And right now, that's the only advantage I have. A small, almost approving nod. That's a reasonable approach, he said. I want to be prepared, I continued. I want everything documented, secured, clear. And then I held his gaze. Then I want him to see exactly what he's done. The room fell quiet again. But this time the silence felt different. Not uncertain, not fragile. Steady. Ethan closed the folder and set it aside. Then we'll do this carefully, he said. Step by step. I nodded. Because that was exactly what I needed. Not chaos. Not confrontation driven by emotion, but structure, clarity, control. As I stood to leave, Ethan added one final thing. Isabella, he said. I turned back. Your husband set this up for a reason, he continued. He trusted you to handle it when the time came. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pain, not grief. Something else. Something stronger. I think I said quietly that time has come. And as I stepped out of that office and into the bright Charleston morning, for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel lost. I felt ready. I didn't confront Daniel. Not yet. If there was one thing Robert had taught me something I finally understood, now it was this. You don't interrupt someone while they're making a mistake that will reveal everything. So I stayed quiet, and I watched. The next few days I paid closer attention than I ever had before. Daniel called more often than usual, checking in with a tone that sounded concerned on the surface, but now I heard something else beneath it. Calculation. Hey, Mom, he said one afternoon. Did the insurance company get back to you? I'm still working on it, I replied calmly. You don't want to let that drag out, he said. Stuff like that can get complicated. I know, I said softly. There was a brief pause. Do you want me to take another look at your accounts? He offered. Just to make sure everything's aligned. Aligned. The word almost made me smile. I think I'll handle it for now, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. Okay, he said finally. Just let me know if you need anything. I hung up slowly, my fingers resting on the phone for a moment. He was testing me, trying to see how much I knew, and when I didn't give him anything, he backed off. But not completely, because people like Daniel don't stop when they're close to something they want. They push, they adjust, they move forward carefully, and Chloe, she didn't even bother to hide it. Her social media became a timeline of ambition. Every post more polished than the last, every caption dripping with confidence. Something exciting is coming. Big announcement soon. Building something special. But it was the location that caught my attention. Every photo, every angle, Always the marina, always the dock, my dock. She didn't say it outright, but she didn't have to. She was already presenting it as theirs, and the more I watched, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a boat, it was a performance, an image, a business they were building before it even existed. I decided to go down to the marina myself, not to confront anyone, just to see, to stand there and look at it not through a screen, not through assumptions, but with my own eyes. The air smelled like salt and sun-warmed wood, just like it always had. For a moment, stepping onto the dock felt like stepping back into a life I had almost forgotten. Simple, steady, real. Then I saw it. Second wind. It was bigger than I expected. Sleek, polished, new. Everything about it stood out against the quiet, practical boats around it. It didn't belong there. Not in the way Robert had intended this place to feel. And standing beside it was Daniel. He didn't see me at first. He was talking to Marcus Reed, the marina manager. I slowed my steps, staying just far enough away to observe without interrupting. "I'm telling you this is going to bring in real traffic," Daniel was saying. "High-end clients. Private charters. It's good for everyone." Marcus stood with his arms loosely crossed, listening but not agreeing. "That slip isn't open for long-term assignment," Marcus replied evenly. "It will be," Daniel said with a confident smile. "Once everything's finalized." Marcus didn't smile back. "Everything isn't finalized," he said. Daniel's tone shifted slightly. More insistent now. "It will be soon," he said. "We're working on it. We." That word again. As if ownership could be spoken into existence. As if saying it enough times would make it true. Marcus glanced past Daniel, and that's when he saw me. His expression changed just slightly. A flicker of recognition. Of understanding. He gave a small nod. Not obvious, not dramatic, but enough. He knew, or at least he knew enough. Daniel followed his gaze and turned. "Mom," he said, surprised. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I stepped forward slowly, my expression calm. "I thought I'd come see what you've been working on," I said. Chloe appeared a moment later, stepping out from the boat with a bright smile. "Isabella," she said, as if we were meeting at a social event instead of standing in the middle of something far more complicated. "What do you think?" She gestured toward the boat. I looked at it again. At the polished surface, the careful details, the money. My money. "It's impressive," I said. Daniel grinned. "Right, this is just the beginning. Beginning of what I asked gently." He didn't hesitate. "A charter business," he said. "Luxury experiences. Private bookings. We're building something real here. We. Always we." "And this dock?" I asked, glancing down at the wood beneath my feet. "It's the perfect location," Chloe said quickly. "Best view, best access. It's going to be amazing for photos, events, everything." I nodded slowly. "And you have permission to use it," Daniel's smile tightened just a fraction. "We're working that out," he said. "It's basically handled." Basically handled. I let the silence stretch just a moment longer than was comfortable. Then I nodded again. "Well," I said softly, "I hope everything works out the way you expect." Chloe beamed. "Oh, it will," she said confidently. "We already have people interested. We're planning a launch event, something really elegant." Daniel stepped in. "Yeah, just a small gathering. Local business owners, potential clients. You know." I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the confidence. The certainty. The complete belief that everything was already his. And for a brief moment, I felt something unexpected. Not just anger. Not just betrayal. But clarity. Because now I understood something I hadn't before. Daniel wasn't just taking from me. He was building on top of what he thought I had already given him. Time. Trust. Access. Control. He thought those things were permanent. He thought they couldn't be taken back. And that belief was about to become his biggest mistake. "I'm glad you're excited," I said quietly. "I am," he replied. This is everything, Mom. A real chance to do something bigger." "Bigger than what?" The question stayed in my mind, but I didn't ask it out loud, because I already knew the answer. Bigger than what his father had built. Bigger than the quiet, steady life we had lived. Bigger than patience. Bigger than responsibility. But not stronger. Never stronger. I took one last look at the boat. At the dock. At the future he was so certain of. and then I turned to leave. "Let me know when the event is," I said. Daniel smiled. "Of course." Chloe added, "You have to come. It's going to be beautiful." I paused for just a second, then nodded. I wouldn't miss it. And as I walked away from the dock, from the boat, from the illusion they had built so carefully, I felt something settle inside me. Not doubt, not fear, but timing. Because now I knew exactly where this was going. And more importantly, I knew exactly when to stop it. The next move didn't come from me. It came from Daniel. 3 days after I visited the marina, he showed up at my house with a folder in his hand and that same careful smile he always used when he was about to ask for something he didn't want questioned. "Hey, Mom," he said lightly as he stepped inside. "Got a minute?" I nodded, though something in my chest had already tightened. "Of course." He set the folder down on the kitchen table and sat across from me, his posture relaxed but not entirely. There was a purpose to this visit. I could feel it. I've been thinking. He began tapping the folder gently. "With everything going on lately, your insurance, your accounts, I think it might be a good idea to get some things more formally organized." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "It's nothing complicated," he continued, "just a basic care plan. You know, emergency contacts, medical authorization, financial oversight, just in case something happens. Just in case." The phrase lingered. "What kind of oversight?" I asked calmly. "Nothing major," he said quickly. "Just the ability for me to step in if you need help. Temporary stuff. It's really standard." Standard. That word again. Everything he said sounded reasonable, safe, helpful. But now I understood something I hadn't before. Reasonable words can hide dangerous intentions. "Can I see it?" I asked. "Of course," he said, sliding the folder toward me. I opened it slowly. The pages looked official enough, typed neatly, structured clearly. But as my eyes moved across the lines, something in me went still, because I recognized the language, not from memory, from instinct. This wasn't just a care plan. This was control, legal control, not immediate but conditional. If I became ill, if I was deemed unable to manage my affairs, if certain thresholds were met, Daniel would gain authority over my finances, my accounts, my decisions, everything. I looked up at him. "You want me to sign this?" I asked. He smiled gently. "Not right this second," he said. "Just take a look. Think about it. It's for your protection. My protection." The words felt hollow now, because I knew what had already happened. I knew what he had already taken. "You seem very prepared," I said. He shrugged lightly. "I've been trying to stay ahead of things," he replied. "After everything with Dad, I don't want anything to fall through the cracks." For a brief moment, the mention of Robert hit something deep inside me. Grief still lived there. Quiet, persistent. But this time it didn't weaken me. It sharpened me. Because Robert had never believed in control disguised as care. He believed in clarity, transparency, responsibility. "This must have taken some time to put together," I said. Daniel hesitated just slightly. "Not too long," he said. "There are services that help with this kind of thing." Services, of course. Which meant this wasn't a sudden idea. It had been planned, prepared, structured. I closed the folder carefully. "I'll review it," I said. "Good," he replied quickly. "That's all I'm asking." But I could see it in his eyes. He wanted more than that. He wanted it signed, and not just eventually. Soon. Because whatever timeline he was working on, it was moving forward. "I'll get back to you," I added. He nodded. "Take your time." But his tone said otherwise. After he left, I didn't wait. I picked up my phone and called Ethan. "I need you to look at something," I said. An hour later, I was back in his office. The same desk, the same calm, the same sense of structure I was beginning to rely on. Ethan reviewed the documents carefully, page by page, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he set the folder down slowly. "This is more than a care plan," he said. "I thought so. It's a conditional power of attorney," he continued. "If certain conditions are met, even loosely defined ones, your son gains significant control over your finances and legal decisions." I felt my stomach tighten. "Loosely defined," Ethan nodded. "The language is broad," he explained, "which means it can be interpreted in ways that favor whoever is holding the authority. Daniel, this could be used to override your decisions," he added. especially if your health becomes a factor. Health. The word hit harder now, because my health was already being affected. I hadn't told Daniel that. I hadn't told anyone. But in the past week, I had started noticing it. The fatigue, the tightness in my chest, the way even simple tasks left me more drained than usual. And without insurance, every symptom felt heavier, more dangerous. He didn't just take my coverage. He increased my risk, deliberately. I looked at Ethan. He knows I don't have insurance right now, I said quietly. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. And he brought you this document anyway, he said. Yes. Silence filled the room for a moment. Because the implication was clear, Daniel wasn't just preparing for the future, he was positioning himself for it. If I sign this, I said slowly, I lose control. Yes. If I don't, you keep it, Ethan replied. Simple, clear, final. I nodded. I'm not signing it. Ethan gave a small nod. I think that's the right decision. I exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving my chest, but not all of it. Because the situation hadn't improved. It had deepened. He's moving faster now, I said. The boat. The dock. This document. He's accelerating, Ethan agreed. Which usually means he believes he's close to securing something. The dock. My dock. He doesn't know, I said. No, Ethan replied. He doesn't. I leaned back slightly, and for a moment I let myself feel it. The full weight of what was happening, the betrayal, the manipulation, the risk, but also the advantage. Because for all of Daniel's planning, for all his careful moves, for all his confidence, he had overlooked one thing. Me. Not completely, not entirely, but enough. Enough to believe I wouldn't see. Enough to believe I wouldn't act. Enough to believe I wouldn't stop him. And that belief was about to cost him everything. I stood up slowly, gathering the folder. What's next? I asked. Ethan looked at me steadily. We prepare, he said. I nodded, because that was exactly what I intended to do. Not react, not confront, not warn, prepare, carefully, completely. And when the time came, I wouldn't just take back what was mine. I would make sure he understood exactly what he had done to lose it. That night, I sat alone in my living room with the lights dimmed low, the folder Daniel had given me, resting untouched on the table. I didn't open it again. I didn't need to. I already knew what it was. What mattered now wasn't what was written on those pages. It was what Daniel believed he could get away with, and how far he was willing to go. Because until now, everything had been quiet, subtle, carefully hidden behind concern and convenience. But something had changed. He was moving faster, pushing harder. And people only do that when they think they're close to winning, which meant I was running out of time. I needed to know one thing clearly, without doubt, without interpretation. If there was any part of my son left that still cared more about me than what he wanted. So I decided to test him. Not directly, not aggressively, just enough to see the truth. The next evening, I invited Daniel and Chloe over for dinner. Nothing formal, just something simple, familiar, safe, the kind of setting where people let their guard down. Chloe arrived first, dressed like she always was, polished, confident, her phone already in her hand. "This smells amazing," she said as she stepped inside, glancing briefly at the kitchen before checking her screen again. Daniel followed a few minutes later. "Hey, Mom," he said, giving me a quick hug. "How are you feeling?" There it was again. That question. Not about what had happened. Not about the insurance. About how I was feeling. As if my health had become a variable in his plans. "I'm all right," I said. We sat down to eat. For a while, the conversation stayed light. Chloe talked about engagement online. Daniel mentioned inquiries about the charter idea. They spoke about the future like it was already secured, like everything was already in place. I listened and waited. Then gently, I shifted the conversation. "I've been thinking about my health," I said, setting my fork down. That got their attention. Daniel looked up immediately. Chloe paused, her expression sharpening just slightly. "What about it?" Daniel asked. "I may need a procedure," I said quietly. "Nothing confirmed yet, but it's a possibility." There was a brief silence. Just a second. But it was enough. Because in that moment, I saw it. Not fear, not concern, calculation. How serious? Daniel asked. Serious enough that I'll need proper coverage, I replied. And since my insurance situation is still uncertain, I may need to consider other options. Like what? Chloe asked quickly. I looked at her. Selling something, I said. The effect was immediate, subtle, but unmistakable. Daniel leaned forward slightly. What do you mean? He asked. I haven't decided, I said. But I need to make sure I can cover whatever comes next. Chloe's posture changed. More alert now, more focused. Which assets are you thinking about? She asked. Assets. Not health, not treatment. Assets. I let the silence stretch for just a moment. Whatever makes the most sense, I said calmly. Daniel exchanged a quick glance with Chloe. Fast, barely noticeable. But I saw it. And in that glance, everything was confirmed. He wasn't thinking about my condition. He was thinking about timing. Mom, he said carefully, you don't need to rush into anything like that. We can figure something out. I asked softly. He didn't answer directly. I just mean, there are options, he said. Like what? Another pause. Longer this time? Then he said something that told me more than anything else could have. What exactly do you still have under your name? He asked. The question landed heavily between us. Direct, focused, not emotional, not concerned, strategic. I held his gaze. You know what I have, I said. Some of it, he replied, but not everything's clearly outlined. Not clearly outlined. The phrase echoed. He had been looking, digging, trying to understand what he could access and what he couldn't. And he still didn't know. Not fully. Chloe leaned in slightly. What about the marina? She asked. That's still partially yours, right? Partially. I almost smiled. Yes, I said simply. Which part? Daniel asked. There it was. The question he had been circling, the one he didn't want to ask too directly but couldn't avoid anymore. I took a slow breath. Why does that matter? I asked. Because if you're thinking about selling something, he said quickly, we need to be smart about it. The marina could be complicated, or valuable, or necessary, or essential to his plan. I leaned back slightly, studying him. You seem very interested in the marina, I said. He hesitated, just for a second, then shrugged. It's a major asset, he said. Of course I'm interested. Of course, Chloe added. Especially if it affects future opportunities. Future opportunities. I nodded slowly. I'll keep that in mind, I said. Dinner continued after that, but the tone had changed. The warmth was gone. The ease had faded. Everything felt sharper, more intentional, more exposed. And when they left, I stood in the doorway watching them walk to their car, their voices low, their conversation urgent. They didn't know I could still see them. But I didn't need to hear their words. I had already heard enough, because that dinner, that simple, quiet test, had given me exactly what I needed. The truth, not softened, not disguised, clear. Daniel wasn't protecting me. He wasn't worried about my health. He wasn't trying to help. He was managing risk, his plans, his timing. And Chloe, she wasn't even pretending anymore. To her, I wasn't family, I was leverage. A resource, something to be used carefully until it was no longer needed. I closed the door slowly and leaned against it, my hand resting on the wood. For a moment, I let the weight of it settle. The loss, the clarity, the final understanding. Because there's a moment when betrayal becomes undeniable, where something inside you shifts permanently, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. And in that moment, I stopped hoping I was wrong. I stopped looking for excuses. I stopped waiting for Daniel to choose differently. Because he already had. And now, so had I. The morning after that dinner, I didn't feel angry. Not in the way I expected. There was no shaking. No tears, no urge to confront Daniel or demand answers. Instead, there was something quieter, something steadier, clarity. Because once you stop hoping someone will do the right thing, you stop waiting. And once you stop waiting, you can finally act. I called Ethan first. I'm ready, I said. He didn't ask what I meant. He already knew. Come in, he replied. By the time I arrived at his office, he had already prepared a list, not emotional steps, legal ones, structured, precise, the kind of steps Robert would have respected. "We start with control," Ethan said, sliding the paper across the desk. I nodded. "Walk me through it." "First," he said, "we restore your insurance properly, no shortcuts, no reliance on previous accounts." "I've already started that process," I said. "Good," he replied. "We'll follow up to ensure there are no gaps or delays." I exhaled slightly. One thing, one piece of stability returning. "Second," he continued, "we secure your financial accounts, new passwords, new recovery contacts, no shared access." I nodded again. "That needs to happen immediately." "It will," he said. "We'll also document every unauthorized change made over the past several months. Documentation. Proof. Not assumptions. Not accusations. Facts." "Third," he said, "we prepare formal notice revoking any implied authority your son may believe he has." Implied authority. The phrase struck something deep, because that's exactly what Daniel had been operating on. Not permission. Assumption. "He never had legal authority," I said. "No," Ethan agreed, "but he had access. And sometimes that's enough to create confusion. Confusion. That's what this had been from the beginning. Not chaos. Not obvious theft. Confusion. Carefully maintained." "What about the doc?" I asked. Ethan leaned back slightly. "That's where things become strategic." I met his gaze. "Explain." "We don't act on the doc yet," he said. "Not publicly." "Why not?" "Because right now," he replied, "your son believes he's close to securing it." I thought about Daniel's confidence, his certainty, his timeline. "Yes," I said, "he does. And that belief," Ethan continued, "is what keeps him moving forward. If we interrupt it too soon, he'll adjust, adapt, hide. But if we let him continue," I said slowly, "he commits fully." Ethan nodded. "Exactly." I sat back, letting that settle. This wasn't just about stopping him. It was about letting him reveal everything, completely. "Then when do we act?" I asked. Ethan's answer was simple. "When it matters most." I knew what he meant. The launch event. The moment Daniel had been building toward. The moment he expected everything to fall into place. "That's when we take control," I said. "Yes." The word landed firmly, decisively. No hesitation. No doubt. For the first time since this began, I felt like I was no longer reacting to Daniel's actions. I was shaping what came next. After I left Ethan's office, I went straight to the bank. Not the branch I usually used, a different one, quiet, unfamiliar, neutral. I sat with a representative and explained everything, not the emotional details, not the betrayal, but the facts. Unauthorized access, account changes, security concerns. Within an hour, everything was reset. New credentials, new contact information, new layers of protection. For the first time in months, the accounts were mine again. Completely. Fully. I didn't feel relief. Not exactly. I felt something stronger. Ownership. From there, I went home and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened every file, every document, every record Robert had left behind. Not because I was looking for something specific, but because I needed to understand everything, every detail, every structure, every decision he had made. And as I worked through it all, something became clear. Robert hadn't just built a life. He had built a system, one designed to protect, to stabilize, to endure, even in his absence, even when I didn't fully understand it. He had trusted that one day I would. By late afternoon, my phone rang. Daniel. I watched it for a moment before answering. "Hey," I said. "Hey, Mom," he replied. "Just checking in." Of course he was. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. A pause. "Did you get a chance to look at those documents I gave you?" he asked. I smiled slightly. "Not yet," I said. "I've been busy." Busy with what? The question came too quickly, too directly. I leaned back in my chair. "Taking care of things," I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. Then he said, "Do you need help with anything?" There it was again. That offer. That reach. But this time, it didn't feel like support. It felt like pressure. "I'm all right," I said calmly. "You sure?" "Yes." Silence. And then, "Okay," he said. "Just Let me know. I will. I ended the call and set the phone down gently. He knew something had changed. He could feel it, but he didn't know what. Not yet. And that uncertainty was exactly where I needed him. Because for the first time since all of this began, the balance had shifted. Not dramatically, not visibly, but fundamentally. Daniel no longer had control over my accounts. He no longer had access to my information. He no longer had the quiet advantage he had been using all along. But he still had one thing: confidence, belief. The assumption that everything was still moving in his favor, and that assumption was about to become his greatest weakness. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out toward the direction of the marina. Somewhere out there, Daniel and Chloe were still planning, still preparing, still building something they believed was already theirs. The boat, the event, the future, all of it resting on one final piece they didn't understand. The dock, my dock. I folded my arms lightly, taking a slow breath, because now everything was in place. The accounts were secure. The evidence was documented. The lawyer was ready. And Daniel was walking exactly where I needed him to go. All I had to do now was wait. The invitation arrived 2 days later. Not by mail. Not formally. But exactly the way Chloe would do it, through presentation. A carefully designed digital card sent to my phone with soft music embedded and a slow, sweeping video of the marina at sunset. Gold lettering. Elegant script. Every detail intentional. Join us for an exclusive evening, celebrating new beginnings, an unforgettable coastal experience. And at the bottom, second wind launch event, I stared at it for a long time, not because I was impressed, but because I finally understood what this was. Not just a party, a declaration, a moment Daniel and Chloe had been building toward for months. A moment where they would stand in front of everyone, friends, local business owners, potential clients, and present themselves as something new, something successful, something established. And at the center of it all would be my dock. I set the phone down slowly. The date was 3 days away. That gave me just enough time. No more, no less. I called Ethan. "It's happening," I said. "I assumed it would," he replied calmly. "We're ready." "Good. And Isabella," he added, "when the time comes, you don't need to raise your voice." "I won't," I said. "Clarity is stronger than anger." I thought about that after we hung up. Clarity, yes, that's what this had become. Not revenge, not emotion, clarity. The night of the event arrived warm and still, the air heavy with the kind of quiet anticipation that settles over the coast just after sunset. I took my time getting ready, not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I needed to feel steady, grounded, in control. I chose a simple navy dress, nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just something clean, strong, unapologetically calm. Robert used to say that confidence didn't need decoration. Tonight, I understood exactly what he meant. When I arrived at the marina, the transformation was undeniable. Lights had been strung along the dock, casting a soft golden glow across the water. Tables were set with white linens. Music played quietly in the background, and everywhere I looked, people. Guests, dressed in summer evening wear, holding drinks, smiling, talking, already drawn into the image Daniel and Chloe had created. For a moment, I stood at the edge of it all, watching, observing, taking it in. Because this was the world they wanted. The life they had built piece by piece, using everything they believed they could control. And now, it was time for them to see what they couldn't. I stepped forward. No one stopped me. No one questioned me. Because to them, I was just another guest. Another face in the crowd. Chloe saw me first. Her expression lit up immediately as she approached, her smile bright, practiced. "Isabella, you made it," she said, air-kissing my cheek. "You look wonderful." "Thank you," I said calmly. "Isn't this incredible?" She gestured around. Everything came together perfectly. Perfectly. The word echoed softly in my mind. "It certainly looks that way," I replied. Daniel joined us a moment later, a glass in his hand, his energy high. "Mom," he said, smiling, "I'm really glad you're here. I wouldn't miss it," I said. And I meant that. Because moments like this Don't come twice. This is it, he said, glancing around proudly. The start of something big. I looked at him, at the confidence, at the certainty, and I wondered just for a second what it must feel like to believe so completely in something that wasn't yours. It's a beautiful evening, I said. It is, Chloe agreed quickly. And just wait, we're about to make an announcement. Of course they were. That's what this was. A reveal. A statement. A claim. Daniel checked his watch. Give me a few minutes, he said. We're about to get everyone's attention. I nodded. I'll be right here. And I was. Standing quietly near the edge of the dock, watching as the crowd gathered, as the energy shifted, as the moment approached. Then Daniel stepped forward. He raised his glass slightly, signaling for attention. The conversations quieted. The music softened. All eyes turned toward him. And just like that, the performance began. Thank you all for being here tonight, Daniel said, his voice confident, steady. This isn't just a celebration, it's a beginning. He paused, letting the words settle. A new chapter, a new vision, something built not just on opportunity, but on legacy. Legacy. The word struck deeper than anything else he had said, because he was standing on it, speaking it, using it, without understanding where it came from. My father spent his life building something meaningful here, he continued, and I'm proud to take that foundation and turn it into something even greater. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not pain. Something sharper. Truth. Around me, people nodded, listened, believed. Because Daniel spoke well. He always had. We're launching a premium charter experience, he said. Something that brings together the beauty of this coast with a level of service and style that stands out. He gestured toward the boat. Second wind gleamed under the lights. This is just the beginning, he added. And right here, this dock will be the heart of everything we build. There it was. The claim. Clear. Public. Undeniable. And for a moment, I let it hang in the air. Let it settle. Let everyone hear it. Because what came next would matter more. Daniel smiled, lifting his glass slightly. To new beginnings. The crowd echoed the sentiment. To new beginnings. And then Marcus Reed stepped forward. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just steadily. He approached Daniel with a single sheet of paper in his hand. Daniel, he said. Daniel turned slightly surprised but not concerned. Yeah, he replied. Marcus held out the document. I need you to take a look at this, he said. The shift was immediate, subtle but real. Daniel's smile faded just a fraction as he took the paper. What is this? He asked. Marcus didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, he said something simple. This dock isn't available for your use. The words landed quietly. But the effect was anything but. Daniel blinked. What? The docking rights for this slip have not been granted, Marcus continued. Effective immediately, your vessel cannot remain here. Silence spread through the crowd. Confused, uncertain, Daniel laughed lightly, shaking his head. No, there's been a misunderstanding, he said. We've already discussed this. Marcus remained calm. There's no misunderstanding, he said. Daniel's grip on the paper tightened. This doesn't make sense, he said. Who made that decision? Marcus met his gaze. The owner. And that's when Daniel turned. Toward me. For the first time that night. Not as a guest, not as background, but as something else. Something he hadn't fully understood. Something he had overlooked. And in that moment, before I even spoke, I saw it. The realization, the doubt, the beginning of everything falling apart. For a moment, no one moved. Not Daniel. Not Chloe. Not the guests gathered under the soft glow of string lights. It was as if the entire marina had inhaled at once and forgotten how to breathe. Daniel stared at me. Not with anger. Not yet. With confusion. A sharp, searching confusion, like he was trying to solve something that should have been obvious but wasn't. Mom, he said slowly. I stepped forward. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to be seen. Enough to be heard. Enough to make it clear that I was no longer standing on the edges of his life, I was standing directly in it. You should read the paper, I said calmly. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Because silence had already done the work for me. Daniel looked down at the document again, his eyes moving faster now, scanning, processing, trying to understand. Chloe stepped closer to him, her expression tightening. "What is it?" she whispered. Daniel didn't answer her. Not right away. Instead, he looked back up at Marcus. "This says the docking rights have been revoked," he said, his voice sharper now. "That can't be right." "It is," Marcus replied evenly. "By who?" Daniel demanded. Marcus didn't look at me. He didn't need to. "The owner," he said again. And this time, there was no confusion. Because Daniel already knew. He turned fully toward me. His face had changed. The confidence was gone. The certainty had cracked. And beneath it was something else. Something raw. Something unprepared. "You," he said. Just one word. But it carried everything. I held his gaze. Yes. The word settled into the space between us. Simple. Final. And for the first time since this began, there was no misunderstanding left. Chloe let out a small, disbelieving laugh. "No, wait," she said quickly. "That doesn't make sense." "The marina isn't." "It is," I said quietly. She stopped. Just like that. Mid-sentence. Mid-assumption. Because something in my tone told her this wasn't a conversation she could redirect. Daniel shook his head slightly. "You don't own the marina," he said. "I don't," I replied. "But I own the dock you're standing on." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to, because the impact was immediate, visible, undeniable. Daniel's grip tightened on the paper. Chloe stepped back half a step, her eyes flicking between me and the dock beneath her feet as if seeing it for the first time. "That's not possible," she said under her breath. But it was. And now, they knew it. Daniel's voice came out lower this time. "How?" he asked. "Your father," I said. He made sure I had full ownership of this section after he passed. The mention of Robert landed heavily. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about me. It was about something older, something stronger, something Daniel had tried to step beyond, without understanding its foundation. "You never said anything," he said. "I didn't need to," I replied. The truth hung there, clear, unavoidable. Because the problem wasn't that I had hidden something. The problem was that he had assumed too much. Chloe recovered first. She always did. "This is just a misunderstanding," she said quickly, turning slightly toward the guests. "We're sure this can be worked out." "No," I said. The word cut through her sentence cleanly. "No anger, no volume, just certainty. It can't." The crowd shifted. Subtle movements, whispers, eyes turning from Daniel to me, and back again. Because the story had changed, and everyone could feel it. Daniel stepped closer. "Mom," he said, lowering his voice. "We can talk about this." "There's no need to." "No need to," what I asked. He hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. "No need to do this, here," he finished. Here, in front of people, in public, in the space where he had just claimed everything. I looked at him carefully. "You chose here, Daniel," I said. "Not me." The words landed harder than anything I could have shouted, because they were true. This wasn't my stage, it was his, and now he had to stand on it. Chloe's voice sharpened. "Isabella, this is unnecessary," she said. "If there's a disagreement, we can resolve it privately." I turned to her. For the first time that night, directly. "This stopped being private," I said, "when my health insurance was canceled to pay for that boat." The shift was immediate, palpable. The crowd didn't just watch now, they reacted, quietly, subtly, but undeniably. Because now the story had a cost, a real one. Chloe's face changed. "Wait," what she said, looking at Daniel. Daniel didn't answer, because he couldn't. Not without confirming it. Not without collapsing everything he had built. "That's not what happened," he said quickly. I held his gaze. "Then explain it," I said. Silence, just a second, but it was enough. Because when the truth is simple, silence becomes the loudest answer. That's when Ethan stepped forward, calm, measured, exactly as he had promised. "Daniel," he said, "I think it would be helpful if we clarified a few things." Daniel turned sharply. "Who is this, my attorney?" I replied. That changed everything. The word alone shifted the tone from confusion to consequence. Ethan held out a folder. "These documents outline the timeline of account changes," he said. including the insurance cancellation, the reassignment of contact information, and the redirection of funds, Daniel didn't take it. Not at first, because taking it meant acknowledging it, and acknowledging it meant everything. Chloe grabbed his arm slightly. "Take it," she whispered. He did, reluctantly. His eyes moved across the pages faster this time, not searching, not questioning, recognizing, because he already knew what was there. He just hadn't expected anyone else to. "This doesn't prove anything," he said, but his voice had lost something. Strength, confidence, belief. "It proves enough," Ethan replied calmly. The crowd was quiet now, not distracted, not uncertain, watching, understanding, because the image Daniel had created was unraveling in real time. Chloe stepped back. Not far, but enough. Enough to separate herself slightly from the center of it. From him. "This is on you," she said under her breath. Daniel turned toward her. "What you handled the accounts," she said quickly. "You said everything was fine, and just like that, the shift became complete. Not just public, personal, because now they weren't standing together. They were standing apart, and Daniel, for the first time that night, was alone. I looked at him, not with anger, not even with satisfaction, but with something else. Clarity. "You took something from me," I said quietly. "Something I needed." He didn't respond. "You put me at risk," I continued. "Still nothing. And you did it," I added, while telling me you were helping me. The words didn't need emphasis. They carried their own weight. And finally, Daniel spoke. "I was going to fix it," he said. I shook my head slightly. "No," I replied. "You were going to use it. That was the difference. And we both knew it." Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was final, because everything had been said. Everything had been shown. Everything had been seen. And there was no way back from that. For a long moment after my words settled into the night air, no one spoke. The music had stopped completely. The glasses in people's hands remained untouched. Even the water, usually restless against the dock, seemed to hold still. Daniel stood there, the folder hanging loosely at his side, his shoulders no longer squared with confidence but pulled inward as if something inside him had finally given way. "This isn't what it looks like," he said. But the words sounded weaker now. Not because they weren't true to him, but because they weren't enough. "Then what does it look like?" I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because there wasn't a better version of the truth. There was only the truth. And it wasn't something he could reshape anymore. Chloe stepped in again, but this time her tone had changed, sharpened, controlled. "This is getting out of hand," she said. "We don't need to do this in front of everyone." I looked at her, really looked at her. At the composure she was still trying to hold together. At the distance she had already begun to place between herself and Daniel. "You're right," I said. "We don't need to." For a brief second, relief flickered across her face. Then I added, "But you chose to build everything in front of everyone." And just like that, it was gone. Because this wasn't something that had been dragged into the open. It had been presented there, celebrated there, claimed there. And now, it would be answered there. Daniel took a step closer to me. "Mom," he said, his voice lower now, stripped of its earlier confidence. "Please, just talk to me." I studied him. Not the version he had shown the crowd. Not the version he had shown me for months, but the one standing here now. Uneven, exposed, real. "Then talk," I said. The word hung between us. An invitation, or a challenge. He swallowed, his jaw tightening. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said. I didn't respond. Because that wasn't an explanation. That was an admission. "I just needed time," he continued, "to build something, to get ahead, to finally have something that was mine." "By taking what was mine," I said. His eyes flickered. "I wasn't taking it," he said quickly. "I was using it temporarily." Temporarily. The word felt almost familiar now, like something he had been telling himself for a long time. "To do what I asked. To make something bigger," he said, his voice rising slightly. "To create something that actually meant something." "Robert built something that meant something," I replied. The name hit him, harder than anything else had. "I know," he said, frustration breaking through. "That's the problem." The words slipped out before he could stop them. And once they were out, they couldn't be taken back. The problem, I repeated. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing a step to the side before turning back. Everything was always about him, he said. His way, his rules, his idea of what mattered. The crowd shifted again, not loudly, but enough. Because now, this wasn't just about money, or insurance, or a dock. It was about something deeper, something older. I spent my whole life trying to measure up to that, he continued. And no matter what I did, it was never enough. His voice cracked slightly. Not dramatically, just enough to show the strain underneath. And now you think this is enough? I asked. He shook his head. I thought it could be, he said. There it was. Not certainty, not arrogance, hope. Misguided, distorted, but real. I saw an opportunity, he went on. Something I could build myself, something that wasn't just handed down. Except it was, I said quietly. He stopped, because he knew every piece of what he had built came from somewhere else. My accounts, my trust, my silence, my grief. You had access, I said, not ownership. I was going to make it work, he insisted. Then I would have fixed everything, put it back. You wouldn't have lost anything. I held his gaze. You already took something I can't get back, I said. His expression faltered. What? Trust, I said. The word landed heavier than anything else. Because it wasn't financial. It wasn't legal. It was personal. And there was no document that could restore it. Silence stretched between us again. Longer this time. Deeper. Chloe shifted beside him, her arms crossing tightly. This is going nowhere, she said. Daniel, we need to focus on what matters right now. He turned toward her. What do you mean? She gestured subtly around them. The event, the clients, the situation, she said. We need to stabilize this. Stabilize. Not fix. Not understand. Stabilize. As if this was just another problem to manage, another image to control. And how exactly do you plan to do that, he asked. Chloe hesitated, just briefly, then said the one thing that made everything clear. We separate it, she said. This, she gestured between him and me, this is personal. The business is something else. The business, something else, as if it existed independently, as if it wasn't built on everything that had just been exposed. Daniel stared at her. You think that's possible? He asked. She didn't answer directly. We need to be realistic, she said. And in that moment, something shifted again. Not in the crowd, not in the situation, in Daniel. Because for the first time, he saw it. Not just what he had done, but who he had done it with. Chloe wasn't standing beside him anymore. Not really. She was standing beside the idea of success. And now that success was slipping, so was she. You knew, he said quietly. Her eyes flicked toward him. What? You knew where the money was coming from? He said. She shook her head quickly. No, I didn't. Yes, you did, he said, his voice steadier now. You just didn't ask. That landed, because it was true, and she knew it. This isn't on me, she said sharply. You handled it. And there it was. The line. Clear. Final. She stepped back. Not just physically, emotionally, completely. I'm not going down with this, she added quietly. Daniel stared at her. For a moment, it looked like he might say something. Fight it, argue, hold on. But then, he didn't. Because some realizations don't need words. They just need silence. He turned back to me slowly. And for the first time that night, there was no defense left in his eyes. Only something else. Something I hadn't seen in a long time. Regret. Not polished. Not controlled. Real. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. I believed him. That was the hardest part. I know, I said. And I did. Because intention doesn't erase impact, and it doesn't undo consequences. But you did, I added. The words were quiet, but they held. And in that moment, everything became clear. Not just what had happened, but what it meant. Not just for him, but for me. Because forgiveness wasn't the question anymore. Understanding wasn't either. The only thing left was what came next. The crowd didn't leave right away. That was the strange part. No one rushed out. No one caused a scene. They simply shifted. Quiet conversations broke off into smaller ones. People stepped back, giving space without making it obvious. A few guests set their drinks down untouched, as if something in the evening had changed the taste of everything. The music never came back on, because there was nothing left to celebrate. Daniel stood in front of me, still holding the folder, still trying to process the distance between what he had expected this night to be and what it had become. Chloe was no longer beside him. She had moved toward the edge of the dock, already speaking to someone else, her voice low, controlled, as if she were repositioning herself in a situation she no longer wanted to be tied to. I watched her for a moment, not with anger, not even with surprise, because some people don't stay when things fall apart. They simply step aside and look for something that hasn't. Then I turned back to Daniel. "We're not going to finish this here," I said. His shoulders dropped slightly, not in relief but in recognition of what that meant, of what was coming. "No," he said quietly. "We're not." Ethan stepped forward just enough to be heard without drawing attention. "We'll follow up formally," he said. "There are several matters that need to be addressed." Daniel nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't question. Because for the first time since all of this began, he understood that this wasn't something he could talk his way out of. This wasn't about perception anymore, it was about consequence. The next morning felt different, quieter. Not because something had ended, but because something had been decided. I sat at the same kitchen table where so many conversations had happened over the years, but this time, I wasn't waiting for anything. I was preparing. Ethan arrived just after 10. He didn't bring emotion with him. He brought structure, clarity, direction. We reviewed everything again. The transactions, the insurance cancellation, the altered account access, the documents Daniel had asked me to sign, each piece laid out carefully, not as a story, but as evidence. "This gives us a clear position," Ethan said. "We can pursue recovery through civil action. We can also establish formal boundaries moving forward." Boundaries. The word felt unfamiliar and necessary. "What does that look like?" I asked. "It means your son no longer has access to your financial systems," he said. "No involvement in your accounts. No authority implied or otherwise." I nodded. "That's already done." "Good," he replied. "Next we address restitution." "Restitution, the money that was redirected," he said. "It needs to be accounted for and returned." I took a slow breath, because this was the part that felt heavier. Not legally, personally. "You don't have to pursue the most aggressive route," Ethan added, "but you do need to establish accountability." Accountability. Not punishment, not revenge. Accountability. "I understand," I said. "And the doc?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "He doesn't have access." Ethan gave a small nod. "Then that stands. Simple, clear, final. There would be no negotiation, no reconsideration, no quiet reversal, because that dock was no longer just a piece of property. It was a boundary, and I wasn't going to let it be crossed again. Daniel came by that afternoon. He didn't call first. He didn't announce himself. He just knocked. For a moment I stood in the hallway looking at the door. Not unsure, not afraid, just aware. Because opening that door meant stepping into something new. Not the past, not what we had been, but what we were now. I opened it. He looked different. Not dramatically, but enough. The confidence was gone. The ease was gone. Even the way he stood, slightly hesitant, slightly uncertain, told me everything I needed to know. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. Yes. We sat in the living room, not at the kitchen table. Not in the space where things used to feel normal. This felt more honest, more real. "I talked to Chloe," he said. I nodded. "I assumed you would." "She's gone," he added. "Gone." The words settled quietly. No surprise, no shock, just confirmation. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it, because even now, loss was still loss. He nodded slightly. "Me too," he said. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just present. "I spoke with your lawyer," he continued. "He explained everything." Of course he did. Ethan didn't leave room for confusion. "There's a lot to fix," Daniel said. "Yes," I replied. He looked down at his hands. "I'll pay it back," he said. "All of it." I studied him. Not looking for perfection, not expecting transformation, just listening. How? I asked. I'll sell the boat, he said. The words came out quietly, but firmly, and for the first time since this began, I believed him. Because there was nothing left for him to protect. No image. No illusion. No one standing beside him telling him it could still work. Just the truth and what it required. That's a start, I said. He nodded. I know it doesn't fix everything, he added. No, I said. It doesn't. Another silence. Then I didn't think it would go this far, he said again. I looked at him. You already said that, I replied gently. He let out a small breath. I just didn't realize what I was doing until it was already done. I considered that, not dismissing it, but not accepting it completely either. Sometimes I said we don't realize something until it costs us more than we expected. He looked up at me, and this cost me everything he said. I held his gaze. Yes, I said. It did. The words weren't cruel. They weren't meant to hurt. They were simply true. And you, he asked quietly, what did it cost you? I didn't answer right away, because the answer wasn't simple. It wasn't just money, or insurance, or stress. It was something deeper, something harder to measure. Trust, I said finally. He nodded. I know, but knowing wasn't the same as restoring. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. That surprised me. Not because of the words, but because of the absence of expectation behind them. I'm asking for a chance to fix what I can, he added. I studied him for a long moment, because this was the part that mattered. Not what he said in front of a crowd, not what he built on assumptions, but what he did, after everything had fallen apart. You can fix the money, I said. He nodded. I will. You can fix the accounts, I continued. Yes, but you don't get to fix everything right away, I said. He didn't argue. Okay, he replied. And in that quiet acceptance, something shifted. Not back to what we were, not even close, but forward, carefully, cautiously, honestly. I need space, I said. I understand. And boundaries, I added. You'll have them. I nodded. Because that mattered. More than apologies. More than promises. Boundaries. Real ones. Clear ones. Enforced ones. We sat there for a moment longer. Not as mother and son trying to return to the past, but as two people trying to understand what came next. And for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel like I had lost something. I felt like I had taken something back. Myself. The house felt different after Daniel left that day. Not empty, not quiet in the way grief had once made it feel, but settled, like something that had been shifting for a long time had finally come to rest. I stood in the living room for a while after closing the door, my hand still on the handle, my thoughts slower now, not tangled, not urgent, just steady. There are moments in life when everything changes all at once. And then there are moments like this, where everything changes because you finally see clearly. Not just what happened, but what it meant, and what it cost, and what you choose to carry forward. The next few weeks were not dramatic. There were no more confrontations, no raised voices, no sudden reversals, just work. Quiet, necessary work. Ethan handled the legal structure of the agreement. Daniel followed through. He sold the boat. Not publicly, not with any announcement, just quietly the way things should have been handled from the beginning. The money came back in stages. Not all at once, but enough to show intent, enough to show effort, enough to show that this time he understood what was required. We didn't speak often, and when we did, it was brief, careful, respectful. There were no attempts to rush forgiveness, no pressure to move past it, just space. And that space was exactly what I needed. My insurance was restored fully within 2 weeks. No gaps, no complications. For the first time since this began, I went to my doctor without hesitation, without fear, without wondering whether I could afford to take care of myself. That alone was worth more than anything that had been taken. Physically, I began to feel stronger. Not overnight, not instantly, but gradually, steadily, the way real healing happens. And emotionally, something had shifted there too. I wasn't carrying the same weight anymore. because I had stopped carrying what wasn't mine. The guilt, the doubt, the constant question of whether I had somehow allowed this to happen. I had trusted. That wasn't weakness. That was love. But love without boundaries is how people lose themselves, and I had come too close to that. The marina became part of my routine again. Not in a controlling way, not in the way Daniel had imagined it, but in a way that felt grounded, intentional, real. I would walk along the dock in the mornings, sometimes watching the boats come and go, listening to the quiet rhythm of the water against the wood. Nothing flashy, nothing staged, just life. The way Robert had always intended it. Marcus would nod when he saw me. Nothing more, nothing needed, because he understood, not the whole story, but enough, and that was all that mattered. A few weeks later, Linda invited me to join her at a small community meeting. It was organized by a local senior advocacy group, something I had never paid much attention to before. But now, I listened. Really listened. Women sharing stories. Quiet ones, uncomfortable ones. Stories about accounts they didn't understand anymore. About decisions made around them. About family members who slowly took control under the language of care. And as I sat there hearing those voices, I realized something that settled deep inside me. I wasn't alone. Not in what had happened, not in how it happened, and not in how easily it could have gone further. When Linda introduced me, I didn't plan to speak, but something in me shifted, the same way it had that night at the marina. Not loud, not forced, just clear. So I stood up, and I told the truth. Not every detail, not every emotion, but enough. Enough for them to understand. Enough for them to see what I hadn't seen in time. Enough for them to recognize it if it ever started happening to them. I didn't speak like a victim, and I didn't speak like someone who had won something. I spoke like someone who had learned. And that made all the difference. After the meeting, a woman came up to me. She didn't say much, just, "Thank you." And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't expected. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was something that could help someone else. Weeks turned into months. Time didn't erase what had happened, but it softened the edges of it, gave it space to settle into something that no longer defined everything. Daniel wrote to me. Not a message, not a quick apology. A letter. Handwritten. Careful. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't justify what he had done. He didn't try to explain it away. He just acknowledged it. And that mattered. More than I expected it to. I didn't respond right away, not because I didn't care, but because I needed to be sure that anything I said came from truth, not from pressure, not from expectation. And when I did respond, it was simple. Not forgiveness, not rejection, just a door, left slightly open. For honesty, for accountability, for something that might one day resemble trust again. But not yet. Because some things take time, and some things should. One evening, I stood at the edge of the dock as the sun dipped low over the water, the sky soft with color, the air still and warm. I thought about Robert, about everything he had built. Not just the marina, not just the life, but the structure, the foresight, the quiet decisions that had protected me when I didn't even realize I needed it. He hadn't just left me assets, he had left me strength, and I had finally learned how to use it. I looked out over the water, the gentle movement of it steady, unchanging, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't felt since before everything began. Peace. Not perfect, not complete, but real and earned. Because I didn't just survive what happened. I understood it. I faced it. And I chose not to lose myself in it. That was the difference. That was everything. And as the light faded slowly across the horizon, I realized something simple. I hadn't lost my life. I had taken it back. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people we trust the most, the ones we love, the ones we believe would never cross a line until they do. And when that happens, it doesn't just break your heart. It challenges your sense of reality, your judgment, your worth. But here's what I learned. Trust is not weakness. Love is not blindness. And protecting yourself is not selfish. Especially as we grow older, especially as women who have spent years caring for others, it's easy to step back, to let someone else handle things, to believe that giving control is the same as receiving care. But it isn't. Real care doesn't take your voice away. Real love doesn't replace your security with risk, and real family doesn't require you to disappear in order to belong. Boundaries are not punishment, they are protection. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to draw a line that cannot be crossed again. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, and forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. Sometimes healing means building something new, stronger, clearer, more honest. So I want to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven him? Would you have walked away? Or would you have done something different? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own strength, your own boundaries, your own worth, please take a moment to like and subscribe. And I'd truly love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? You're not alone in your story, and you never have been.